Hey, what is up mortals? Tim here! And before we get into the video, there are a few things I'd like to say. First off, I'd like to let you all know that we have a merch store! Some of the items in it are only available for a limited amount of time. So, if you're interested, go into the description and check it out! Each purchase helps us make more content. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the video! Last episode, we looked deep into the history of all in-game main timelines and events up to Generation 1. Now, we will dive into the current timeline of the Pokemon world. During the events of Pokemon Red, Green, Blue, Yellow, Fire Red, and Leaf Green, you portray the character known as Red, and you are starting on your very first journey. Red has a rival named Blue, who also happens to be Professor Oak's grandson. During his travels, Red not only challenges and beats all 8 of the Kanto gym leaders, but also manages to take down the dreaded Team Rocket before eventually beating the Elite Four. Once Red defeats the last of the Elite Four, Lance, he sees that Blue is the champion before him. Thus, he has to battle his old rival for the throne. In the end, Red beats Blue and becomes the new regional champion of the Indigo League. After becoming champion, he ventures to the Sevi Islands to finally finish off Team Rocket and help Celio connect his Pokemon Network Center to the Hoenn region. Around this time, the main player characters of Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, that'd be Brandon and May, set off on their journeys after moving from the Johto region. By saving Professor Birch from the Poochyena with the help of Professor Birch's starter Pokemon, they head off on their own journey. Brandon or May, depending on the player character's choice, is the player's rival, until a young, sickly, green-haired boy named Wally takes up that role. Along their journey throughout the Hoenn region to challenge the 8 gym leaders, the player also runs afoul of teams Magma and Aqua, who seek to utilize the legendary Pokemon of Groudon and Kyogre for their own nefarious purposes. The player is eventually able to stop Kyogre and Groudon from destroying the Hoenn region, and then continues on to defeat the Elite Four, becoming the champion, which, later in the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire games, the player saves the world from a meteor with the help of Mega Rayquaza in the Delta episode. Between the events of Generations 1, 2, 3, 4, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the events of Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon Ranger happen. Between the time of Generations 1 and 2, which we can assume was between the 2 years, since Gen 2 takes place 2 years after Gen 1, a volcanic eruption destroys Cinnabar Island, once home to the 7th gym leader of Kanto, Blaine. Because of the eruption, Blaine relocates his gym to the Seafoam Islands. The once defeated champion Blue takes the empty Viridian City gym spot ever since Giovanni disbanded Team Rocket and mysteriously vanished after his defeat by Red. During this time, our former champion Red heads to Mount Silver, isolating himself and training day and night, leaving his family and friends behind. Because of Red's absence, Lance becomes the new champion of the Kanto region. The Ice Master of the Elite Four, Lorelei, heads back to her home on Four Island, while the Ghost Master of the Elite Four, Agatha, retires from her position. This leaves Bruno as the last remaining Elite Four member. Shortly after, 2 new members are added to the Elite Four, the Dark Master Karen and the Psychic Master Will. The final Elite Four spot is taken up by Koga, Poison Master and former gym leader of the Fuchsia City Gym, which he leaves in charge of his daughter Jasmine. These are just some of the major events that happened during the periods of Generations 1 and 2, but there are some little bits of events that happened during this time that we will quickly go over. Between the events of Generations 2 and 4, Annabelle enters an ultra wormhole and is found by Nanu and Looker in Alola. Between Generations 1 and 2, extensive research confirms the existence of Steel and Dark types in the region of Kanto. Around Generations 1 and 2, Baoba leaves Kanto when his Safari Zone is closed and begins planning to open a new Safari Zone in Johto as a replacement. Later, the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town is converted into a radio tower. A PAL Park is opened in Fuchsia City to replace the Kanto Safari Zone. Later, during Generations 2 and 4, a new battle frontier is built in Sinnoh and Johto. Finally, Professor Rowan eventually returns to Sinnoh after spending 4 years in Kanto. This may seem like a lot, but bear with me, this is only the start of the journey throughout the Pokemon world. Now then, let's look into the events that happened 3 years after the first 3 generations. During the events of Generation 2 and its remakes Heart Gold and Soul Silver, our main heroes, Lyra, Chris, and Ethan, but for simplicity's sake, let's just call them the player, start on their journey on becoming the best Pokemon trainer that there ever was. The player is given a task by the Johto region's very own Professor Elm. To help with the task, Professor Elm gives the player a Johto starter. With their task fulfilled, the player receives a call from Professor Elm, telling them that someone has broken into the lab and stolen a Pokemon. Hastily making their way back, the player runs into a strange red-haired boy who was hiding behind a window near the Pokemon lab and had been plotting to steal a Pokemon. The red-headed boy then challenges the player to a battle, which they swiftly lose. In the ensuing conflict, the red-haired boy drops his trainer card. Along the journey, the player continues to run into the strange red-haired boy, who challenges the player over and over again. Between the 3 years, a fringe faction of Team Rocket had formed, trying to bring back Giovanni and reviving Team Rocket. This led to them doing evil, despicable things to Pokemon, such as cutting off Slowpoke's tails and selling them, as well as holding the director of the radio tower hostage. Team Rocket also used strange radio waves to make Magikarp evolve quicker and unnaturally, making the red Gyarados at Lake of Rage, which we eventually catch. With Lance's help, the player is able to make Team Rocket disband once and for all. The player then collects all 8 of the Johto badges, and eventually challenges and beats the Elite Four, as well as the champion Lance, becoming the new champion of Johto. Not long after, the player is given a ticket by Professor Oak to board the SS Aqua to go to Kanto. There, the player challenges all 8 of the Kanto gym leaders, beating them and managing to collect 16 badges. Upon talking with Professor Oak, he gives the player approval to go to Mount Silver. There, the player runs into the lost champion, Red. Just as Red mutters his famous words, ... The player challenges Red to an intense battle, with the player proving victorious. After being defeated, Red flees from Mount Silver, never to be seen again. After the events of Generation 3, Barry and Lucas or Don, the player characters, leave Twin Leaf Town to see the red Gyarados that was recently reported to be seen in Lake Verity. There, they run into a strange man with a serious demeanor and his assistant. This man happens to be Professor Rowan. The professor leaves the lake and forgets his briefcase by accident. The player and Barry decide to go into the grass with no Pokemon and get attacked by 2 wild Starly. Without knowing what to do, they open the briefcase and find 3 Pokeballs containing Turtwig, Chimchar, and Piplup. They both choose one of the starters to help fend off the attacking Starly. The player and Barry learn that the Pokemon are Professor Rowan's, who, instead of taking the Pokemon back, gives them to the player and Barry, because he sees great potential in them. As with previous generations, the player has to challenge all 8 gym leaders, as well as dealing with the regional villains Team Galactic. The leader of Team Galactic, named Cyrus, wants to remake the universe in his own image, using the powers of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. The player manages to defeat Cyrus and calms down the creation trio. With the end of Team Plasma, the player goes on to defeat the Elite Four as well as the Pokemon champion Cynthia, thus becoming the new Pokemon League champion of Sinnoh. Now for a lightning round on events that happened between Generations 2 and 5. Approximately 2 years after Generation 2, the events of Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness take place. Cypher and Team Snag'em return to the Olray region and create XD-001, a supposedly unpurifiable shadow Pokemon. But their plans are thwarted by a young boy named Michael. Meanwhile, Dr. Kamiko and Shobin invent Robo-Groudon and Robo-Kyogre, and Professor Crane invents the Purified Chamber, where shadow Pokemon can be purified more easily. Yes, these side games are canon with the main games. Don't question me. Between the events of Generations 2, 4, and 5, the Team Rocket grunt who stole the machine part in Kanto during Generation 2 and 4 returns to Unova, intending to reform Team Rocket there, despite its second defeat. He moves to Iciris City, where he falls in love and has a son. Caitlin leaves the Sinnoh-Johto battle frontier and returns to Unova, becoming an Elite Four member. Team Plasma member scientist Dudley creates Genesect in an attempt to create the strongest Pokemon in existence, by altering an ancient insect Pokemon with cybernetic upgrades. Later, Team Plasma steals Hugh's sister's Purloin, and Hugh swears to get it back one day. Now we are in the time frame of the events of Pokemon Black and White. Hilda or Herbert, the player character, along with their friends Sharon and Bianca, get their first Pokemon from a box that Professor Juniper left behind in the player's house in Nuvema Town. The three decide to leave Nuvema Town and journey across the Unova region, with Sharon wanting to learn everything about Pokemon, and Bianca wanting to go against her father's wishes of her not becoming a Pokemon trainer. Upon arriving in Accumula Town, they encounter Team Plasma talking about liberating Pokemon from people to make them truly free. The player encounters a strange green-haired man named N, and he challenges the player to a battle. Fun fact and side note, N's real name is Natural Harmonia Gropius. Yes, I'm not joking, that's his real name. Go ahead, look it up. Someone at Game Freak spent their Saturday night coming up with that name, I swear to everything. Anyway, the main character beats N, and we learn that N can read his and other Pokemon's words, thoughts, and feelings. As per usual in all the games, the player has to defeat 8 gym leaders and defeat the Elite Four, but upon their arrival, they realize that N has beaten Alder, and suddenly a huge castle surrounds the Pokemon League. The player navigates through the castle, finding N at the top of it, with his legendary Pokemon, either being Zekrom or Reshiram, depending on which game you picked. Reshiram or Zekrom then helps the player defeat N, because it likes their ideas on how the world should be. N is eventually defeated by the player, realizing his wrongdoings, and decides to turn over a new leaf until the real Team Plasma leader Getsis shows up. Getsis reveals that he used the Team Plasma liberation goal and manipulated N since he was a child for his own deeds. The main character fights Getsis and eventually beats him. After everything, N flies off on his legendary Pokemon, never to be seen again. The player then gets recruited by Looker to capture the 7 Sages and eventually re-challenge the Elite Four and beat Alder, becoming the champion of Unova. After becoming the champion, they head off with Zekrom and Reshiram, searching for N throughout the Unova region. 2 years after the events of Pokemon Black and White, we land in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. During the 2-year gap between the 2 games, Bianca becomes an assistant of Professor Juniper. Cillian, Shilly, and Cress retire as gym leaders, allowing Sharon to take the place as the first gym leader. Bryson and Lenora also retire from being gym leaders, with Roxy and Marlin taking their places. Alder has also retired as champion, and Iris has become the new champion, since the player from Black and White has been searching for N. 5 of the 7 Sages have left Team Plasma, and Getsis and Zinzolon form a new Team Plasma, solely dedicated to conquering Unova. A landslide seals off Route 10 and a majority of Victory Road, forcing another Victory Road to be built. Another landslide seals off Challenger's Cave. Nate or Rosa, our new player characters, receive the first Pokemon from Bianca in their hometown of Aspertia City. Together with Hugh, who hopes to take back his sister's Purloin from Team Plasma, the duo takes on the new lineup of gyms in the Unova region. After earning their 7th badge from Drayden, Team Plasma attacks Opalucid City, covering the city in unbreakable ice. The Shadow Triad takes the opportunity to steal the DNA splicers from Opalucid Gym. The player and Hugh chase Team Plasma to Humilau City, where, after earning their final badge, they confront Zenzolin, Colress, and the Shadow Triad at the Giant Chasm. After the Triad releases Hugh's sister's Purloin, now a Liepard, Hugh tells the player to go ahead and confront Team Plasma's leader, Getsis. Just before Getsis freezes the player alive with Curum's Glaciite, N flies in on Reshiram or Zekrom, saving them. However, Getsis uses Curum's power to turn Reshiram or Zekrom back into an orb, then uses the DNA splicers to turn Curum into black or white Curum. The player knocks out Curum, causing the 2 dragon Pokemon to separate, then defeats an enraged Getsis. Thankfully, N suggests that the player proceed to the Pokemon League. Heeding N's words, the player ascends Victory Road, defeats the Elite Four, and emerges victorious in battle with the new champion, Iris. After returning home, Hugh's sister thanks the player for helping her big brother, and tells the player that she has been dreaming of a Zoroark calling out the player's name. At Hugh's suggestion, the player returns to Victory Road, finding the Zoroark that leads them to the ruins of N's castle, where N and Reshiram or Zekrom challenge them to a battle. After being defeated, N says goodbye to his dragon, and releases it by asking it to turn back into an orb to give to the player. The player climbs to the top of Dragon Spiral Tower, and faces off against the legendary dragon Pokemon again, this time in an attempt to capture it. Next time, we'll be diving into generations 6 through 8, then putting them all into a timeline, so be ready for that. Once again, thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now, there are still a few more things I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video, as well as the editor of this video. Their details will be in the description below. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're just interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you like the video. Until then, peace out, mortals. Have an amazing day.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand.